The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
For the first time in 16 years, Illinois has elected a Republican governor. What are we to expect from Governor-elect Bruce Rauner, and can he work with the powerful Democratic bosses in Springfield?
Nationally, Republicans picked up at least 7 seats and control of the Senate. What does this reshaped political landscape mean for Illinois, its senior senator, and the road ahead?
And we make a return visit to a Chicago hospital once on the verge of closing forever, a vital struggle of hope over despair. Those stories and much more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening. I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Tonight, a closer look at an historic election. Not only did Illinois voters choose a new governor, they voted for a higher minimum wage and higher taxes on millionaires.
For all those polls predicting a tight race, Republican Bruce Rauner won by a clear and convincing margin. And after a bitter and expensive campaign, he faces big challenges in a Democratically dominated Springfield. For Governor Quinn, the size of his stunning loss seemed to come as something of a shock.
Every vote counts. There's a lot of votes still to be counted.
On election night, Governor Quinn hung on to a thin reed of hope that some late votes might fall his way. But by Wednesday, it became clear, even to him, that Bruce Rauner had piled up a solid margin of victory.
Now the votes have been counted. They just finished over in Cook County. More ballots were counted this afternoon. Vote by mail ballots are still counting, but it's clear that we do not have enough votes to win the election, and therefore we respect the result. We respect what the voters did yesterday, and I look forward to working with the new administration.
For Bruce Rauner, the wealthy private equity investor who spent $27 million of his own money, the victory marked a strong political performance, beating Quinn everywhere in Illinois except Cook County.
Are you ready for a new direction? Are you ready to bring back Illinois?
On election night, Rauner told his supporters the election results gave him a mandate to shake up Springfield.
This is an historic time in Illinois. The voters have spoken.
In the state's most expensive and negative race ever, Quinn had tried to cast himself as the populist, battling an out-of-touch billionaire. But the tactic ultimately failed, with voters tired of the shenanigans in Springfield.
And we are the government of the many, and we do have to take on the government of the money.
As governor, Bruce Rauner will have a different kind of money issue. He is inheriting a fiscal nightmare. Illinois is buried in debt, unable to meet its pension obligations or even pay many of its bills.
We already have a $7 billion structural deficit.
Political science professor and former Chicago alderman Dick Simpson said Governor-elect Rauner will have to work with Democratic leaders in Springfield if he expects to get anything done.
If we don't enact the continuation of the income tax, there'll be another $4 billion. We have a $100 billion pension problem, and we're still having sluggish economic development.
And during a lecture to political science students at UIC, former Governor Jim Edgar agreed Rauner cannot go it alone.
First thing he did after it was obvious he was going to be elected governor, he reached out to Mike Madigan and John Cullerton and said he wanted to work with them. I think that's very important.
The voters have chosen to have a divided government, not so we can fight, not so we can bicker, not so we can get angry with each other, but it's to find solutions, bipartisan solutions, to solve the problems of Illinois.
And now comes the hard part, governing a divided state where Democrats still hold a powerful grip on both houses in the legislature. Here's Barbara with more on what's at stake for Governor-elect Rauner and the voters of Illinois.
Thanks, Chris. Bruce Rauner promised to shake up Springfield, but can he? Joining us to tackle these and other questions are our guests, Illinois Public Radio State House Bureau Chief Amanda Vinicki, Chicago Sun-Times columnist Mary Mitchell, and CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute, John Tillman. Welcome to you all.
Great to be here.
The poll said this would be so close, but it wasn't. Let's take a quick look at the numbers. Bruce Rauner won in almost every single one of the 102 counties in the state of Illinois, except for a slim lead in Cook County for Governor Quinn. Amanda, what happened here?
You know, what you have, I think, that happened here is really an unpopular governor, period. You look back to the primary where Governor Quinn had an opponent nobody had heard of, had no money, and yet a lot of downstate actually voted for Tio Hardeman. They never even heard of him. That shows the appetite people had for change in government. I think that's what it was. Also, Bruce Rauner had made a very active point of reaching out to the suburbs and trying to hold back on social issues so that he didn't tick anybody off. He successfully, I think, was able to do that, much as it was frustrating for many of the journalists and those really seeking answers. It helped in not really, waking any major beasts. And so he was able to, get through in these normally areas where you see particularly Republicans fail.
But even in the city, Governor Quinn maintained only a slim lead. Mary, what happened there?
Well, I think that the campaign manager for Governor-elect Bruce Rauner put it best, and that is that campaign took a page from the Obama campaign in 2008, and what they did was keep putting on the message, change, change, change. And so I think that there was frustration. Former Governor Quinn now failed to get out the base of his voters. There was no excitement going into this campaign. What's most surprising to me is that even though President Barack Obama, and this is his hometown, came to town to rally and campaign for Quinn, it did not translate into people being motivated to come out to vote. People stayed home. They held their nose and voted, or they stayed home.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is that Democrats in large numbers abandoned Governor Quinn, and you can see that in the city of Chicago. You look at Senator Durbin's vote totals, then look at Quinn's vote totals, and there's a huge drop-off. Those people split their ballot, and I think this happened all over the state. And I think the reason is Governor Quinn, for a very long time, has been trying to make the case that the economy is recovering. But the fact is we have 300,000 fewer people working in Illinois now than in 2008, and the people feel that in their daily lives. Their average income for the average person is down. They feel that. And so I think the narrative of trying to vilify Bruce Rauner just failed. The public has seen that now for a long time, and I think they just looked at the facts on the ground.
I think it did work. I mean, people weren't happy to vote for Bruce Rauner by and large. There certainly is a segment of the population that was really pumped to get a Republican in there and loves Bruce Rauner. But by and large, I think it's more hold their nose. Both of these guys made the other one look terrible. And so very few people were excited. That's part of why you didn't get more people coming out to vote. But in general, there's a lot of disgust, and I think that's going to carry over into governing. And whereas Bruce Rauner in his victory speech tried to move away from that, and we've seen him change course. In the primary, he was this guy who hated unions. Then he didn't say the word government union bosses really ever again throughout the whole general election. And then he wins, and you saw in his victory speech, compassion and caring for the vulnerable.
But it didn't matter. This is the thing that was so interesting about this campaign, is that even though he made some vague promises, he flip-flopped on some key issues, which is the minimum wage. We talk about people who are struggling.
Sure, we'll get to that later.
Yeah, he flip-flopped on that. People still did not have confidence that, having been in office, 6 years now?
6 years.
That Quinn had the ability to pull it off.
I think that
anything was going to change.
I think that's exactly right, Mary. I think the bottom line on this is that the public concluded that Governor Quinn was just not up to the job that faced him. We have rolling deficits. We had a tax hike of $7 billion that we were promised would balance the budget and pay our pensions. It's done neither. And just issue after issue after issue eventually aggregated to have this discontent. And I think what's interesting about the margin of victory, I think the margin of victory, 6-point win is much larger than anybody anticipated, much larger than the polls.
Much larger than the polls.
And much larger. Rauner outperformed the national Republican wave. And so though I think Quinn's attack ads on Rauner were effective, they really drove his numbers down in terms of likability. The bottom line is the message of shaking up Springfield, trying to change the status quo, push the power brokers out, at least at the governor's office for now, obviously not in the legislature. We're all critical to this, and I think it was across the party lines.
Let me ask you this. I mean, this was the most contentious and the most expensive, $100 million. We heard Bruce Rauner put in about $27 million of his own money here. People have accused him of buying this election. How much of it was about the money?
Well, I don't know if it's so much about the money as the fact that he was a likable candidate. And he wasn't a stranger. He didn't come out of nowhere. Right. He didn't come from downstate someplace and come into the west side or the south side and try to sell himself. People knew him. And people, change makers, game players, people who really had influence within their own groups, they knew Bruce Rauner, and I think that made the difference. He historically, you know, Republican candidates running for statewide office don't go over to the black church and campaign for anything. Right. He did that, and I think that boldness
He's a hard worker.
that boldness paid off.
He is absolutely a hard worker, and I think his outreach to the black community, minority community in general, predated his campaigning for governor. He's been doing this for years with his education reform. But I think there's another point about the money. It's always interesting to me how people talk about the wealthy guy on the right, in this case a Republican, buying the election, while the unions put in a huge amount of money for Governor Quinn this time. They put a huge amount of money in for him in 2010, and they're the largest funder of political campaigns for both Madigan and Cullerton. So there's money on both sides trying to influence the voters. Let's not turn, just because he did it with his own money instead of mandatory union dues, into something that's not a
$100 million is still $100 million. That's a lot of money. Let's talk about the landscape that Governor-elect Rauner faces now. He's moving into a divided government, and he's certainly extended an olive branch, said that he had reached out to Senate President John Cullerton and House Speaker Mike Madigan. There are some questions about how those phone calls took place.
Barbara, I mean, let's be clear here. Who knows what is going on there? But that is not a good start. We have a speech and already a pretty beginning for Bruce Rauner, I think, in that you talk to the speaker and he says, no, I never got a call. I never spoke with Bruce Rauner. What is going on there? That is terrible. If you have a candidate who has a history of going back and forth on issues, and Bruce Rauner, now that he's elected, kind of fresh page. And that's where you start off with potentially a lie. I haven't heard back. I've put in calls to the Rauner camp, haven't gotten anything back in terms of saying, oh, no, this is what he said. They talked at this point in time. If everybody was so sleepy, they just forgot about the conversation.
But you never know.
What's going on there? That
we
is
are
craziness.
talking about Springfield. We are talking about Michael Madigan. We are talking about people who are now
Let's not assume
being
one side
concerned
it's craziness.
about their own power in Springfield. I don't know what happened there. You know, it seems incredible to me that from the very start, that Bruce Rauner would come out and just absolutely lie about making a phone call. It's too silly, you know.
It's where everything is going to start. He has his first appearance later this afternoon of the day that we're taping, and that's what everybody's going to be asking about right off the bat.
Which is pitiful for us. If we're going to be concentrating on a phone call and not concentrating on how this budget
I totally agree with that.
Is going to be filled, then we are the problem.
I'm not expecting answers in that right away.
There is a nightmare fiscal crisis going on in this state, and for the reporters to elevate a little tiny brouhaha, I think it's just ridiculous. We should move along into doing the business of the state.
Do you think he's going to? We haven't had answers throughout the entire campaign, and
by now we should be getting.
By now we should be.
And we shouldn't let him off the hook of giving those answers by letting him go into distraction.
There's a whole bunch of new governors all over the country, and believe me, nowhere else have all the governors, including the Democrat governor who beat a Republican in Pennsylvania, are they putting their agenda out 2 days after the election.
Exactly.
This takes a little time, and they put that together.
That crushing financial crisis. I mean, we're kind of a deer in the headlights as some of these issues unfurl. And one of the big issues that Bruce Rauner beat up Governor Quinn about was making this temporary income tax hike permanent. That is something the first of the year. If this doesn't happen, it's going to come due.
That's waiting out there.
$1 billion. What happens now?
What's so great about this conversation is that all during Quinn's tenure, we've run deficits every single year. And it's become the new normal. We have deficits, even though we theoretically have a balanced budget requirement. Suddenly now, Bruce Rauner is the governor-elect, and oh my God, those deficits actually matter. And gosh darn, we have to solve them right away, by January. I think that's kind of funny. I think the second thing that's interesting about the whole sort of landscape is everybody everybody talks about cuts to services. And of course, I don't think you're going to see any budget from Bruce Rauner that cuts core services for the poor and disadvantaged. I think he's going to be very focused on that. He has a long history of being focused on that. But people never talk about the cuts to household budgets, average working class, middle class people, people just starting out in their career trying to rise. Those budgets get cut when you raise taxes. They're about to get a little bit more money in their pocket on December 31st because of a promise made in January of 2011. I think that should be honored, and we're going to have to find a way to accommodate all those interests.
Rauner himself, however, has talked about being open to not a full rollback and even an extension of that income tax increase in his first year, because if you don't want a deficit, there either has to be cuts or there has to be more money, and frankly, there's probably going to be some of both. I don't think Rauner is going to have an easy time doing that, however, as we talked about, and potentially already an animus between he and the legislative leaders. They're not going to, we have this veto session, a lame duck area, when the tax increase was passed last time around, pardon me.
But here's the bottom line. The bottom line is that the message that Rauner brought on economics and being able to fix this money problem in Illinois resonated with the voters.
Yes.
And because it resonated with the voters, that's what people are going to be looking for. They don't care how he does it.
Right.
You know, if he's got to get a magic wand and tap somebody on the head.
I think that's a great point. So he essentially won because he said, I'm going to get our economy going. We're going to become a growth economy again instead of an economy in decline. So his number one policy choice has to be, how do I do that? If he buys into raising the taxes like many on the left and some of the establishment pundits already want him to do, not only does he hurt his own brand that got him elected, he's going to continue this directional signal to the people in Illinois thinking about leaving that they should go ahead and leave. By focusing on the spending side and trying to remove the potholes, roadblocks, and barricades to people starting and growing businesses in Illinois, he can start to grow revenues beneficially rather than detrimentally.
But that's not going to deal with the budget right away. I mean, that's where you have to answer some of these other questions.
Budget cuts take a year. It all takes time. All these things roll out over 12 months. Budget cuts take time to roll out. When you raise taxes, it doesn't come in month one. It comes in over 12 months. And the same thing is true with beneficial policies that get people hiring again in the state. And it's about people perceiving there's opportunity in the future in Illinois. If he raises taxes, they're going to think it's better off in Indiana.
Let's talk about some of the policy issues and some of the ballot issues that were decided by voters here in Illinois on Election Day. They agreed to pass a Crime Victims Bill of Rights and another measure outlawing voter discrimination. Then there were a couple of other issues that were non-binding questions, more of an opinion poll. Some of those include mandating insurance companies to pay for birth control for women, and then two potentially controversial issues. One, a tax on millionaires to help fund education, and another, raising the minimum wage to $10. Now, these are not binding, but how does that square with this new governor and the positions he's taken, Mary?
I don't even think it matters. I think that was just bait thrown out there to get people to the polls.
That's exactly
and unfortunately, it didn't work.
It didn't seem to work with the Democrats.
It didn't work at all with the Democrats. Those are issues that Democrats care about or would be concerned about, and it was supposed to kind of lead them to the polls.
The millionaire's tax, to do that, you need a constitutional amendment. We couldn't see the General Assembly last time around get that through. We're not going to see that now, particularly with Rauner as governor, and I don't think anybody's going to try. The minimum wage we could see, however, dealt with. Governor Quinn has said that that's something he wants checked off his agenda. And I could see the Democratic General Assembly, going for that and getting it off before Bruce Rauner comes in, and they have a fewer chance of that ever going forward.
And all those non-binding referendums almost always pass because, first of all, they're non-binding. The people that focus on them at the very bottom of the ballot, apparently in Chicago, some people didn't even get these questions given to them because the second page of the ballot was left off. There's no argument made for the other side, so you're just deciding it in isolation. And let's not forget that the Democrats had supermajority control and a Democrat governor, and they couldn't pass the minimum wage increase in 2014.
Couldn't or didn't because they wanted it out there as a campaign issue. I think it's both.
Ironically, it passed in Michigan this year with Republican control and a Republican governor. I think that's kind of interesting.
Do you think Governor Quinn will be able to push this forward and do Bruce Rauner a favor? I mean, this would be an awkward moment for him based on his stance on the issue.
I think it would be a mistake for him to do it because I think if I was Governor Quinn, I would rather leave that as a negotiating tool for the legislative leaders to have some leverage with the incoming governor. If they pass it during the lame duck, I think it takes the issue away and lets the new Republican governor off the hook. And I probably should have said that.
Looking for a legacy.
And he's going to be looking to leave on a high note, as opposed to that very sad moment when he had to concede.
And it was a sad moment. You could see it in his eyes.
Oh, yeah.
His
whole body, really.
No question, he felt it emotionally. Sad for him, but I think obviously the people spoke and they think there's a new beginning, and I think that's optimistic for the state.
Let's shift focus now onto the Senate, where Republicans clearly had a good night, winning at least 7 Senate seats and control of the Senate. Here in Illinois, Democrat Dick Durbin easily beat Jim Oberweis, but that second top Democrat now finds himself second in a minority party. What does that mean for him? What does that mean for our state? What does that mean for the president's remaining 2 years? Lots of questions here, Amanda.
Lots of questions here. And, you know, Dick Durbin is still Illinois' senior U.S. Senator. He still carries weight, has the ear of the president. So his stature is not falling in that regard. It's falling, however, just along the same lines as the rest of the U.S. Senate. And yeah, that could hurt Illinois. I think it's going to be a difficult 2 years for President Barack Obama, and he'll still be beloved here in Illinois, but that's going to be about it. It's going to be dirty in Illinois. It's going to be dirty in D.C.
But I think that Durbin, of course, he's seasoned. He understands how to negotiate through these kind of good times and the bad times. And so I think that he will go back and he will do just fine because he's already been through this.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think we're going to lose any kind of Illinois influence in the negotiations that take place in Washington. What I think is more interesting, though, is going to be to see if the Republicans, like the Democrats have, overplay their hands. We've now had 4 wave elections in the last 8 years: 06, 08, 10, and 14. 2 against the Republicans and now 2 against the Democrats. And I think what's interesting is each time the party that was victorious misread the effect. These are waves of repudiation. These are not waves of endorsement. And so what you have before us now nationally is both parties jockeying for what their 21st century vision is going to be for the country. We've been sort of adrift as a country since the Cold War ended. What is our purpose now? What is our unifying purpose as a culture? And I think a politician on either side who is able to patch together a compelling vision will have a great opportunity in 2016.
A great opportunity if they use it. I think that's part of the problem with politics all over. It's where you see voters being disgusted, period, and you see these waves because so much of it is about politics and not policy. Yeah. And people aren't dumb. They see that. You notice it. It is visible. And
it doesn't bode well that, you know, the day after this new wave, that you would have someone come out and talk about, which Mitch McConnell did, killing Obamacare, you know, killing the Affordable Care. Do we really want to, as a people, do we really want to go through that whole fight again?
Well, I think Mitch McConnell and President Obama both did what they had to do in their respective speeches or the press conference for the president, which is they had to alleviate some or mitigate some of their base's unhappiness, and that's what both of them were doing. That was what McConnell was doing, and certainly the president did that when he talked about the 2/3 and immigration. I think what will be much more interesting is if they do go after Obamacare, is how do they do that? Because if they go after it the way he talked about, that'll be a failure. But if they go after and trying to reform the popular parts of it and carve out those things that are unpopular, like the 30-hour work week, which has killed jobs.
Right. Well, I mean, there are so
nobody
many
cares
other
about
issues.
Tinkering, but if you come out with a full scale, we're going to kill it. That's going to.
And I don't think
there
that's
are so many
happen.
people who rely on it for health care. You just.
I think it's going to be a fixed piece by piece rather than a full-on repeal is what I expect to happen.
Which is what everybody had been waiting for, really, all along, but wasn't able to get there because, again, of politics. Everybody was too worried about protecting their own hides than dealing with many of these issues. I mean, on both sides, period.
Well,
I think that's where there's frustration.
In the House, the Republicans passed bill after bill after bill, and Harry Reid never let them see the light of day. So now we're going to see the Republicans have to stand up for an agenda and a policy prescription and own it and defend it. And I think that's going to be highly entertaining.
And actually do something.
That's exactly the right.
Well, we're going to switch gears again. I'd love to. This week, we also got a chance for a look not only at the future of our state, but also at the conceptual drawings for one of the newest features
Emphasis
along
on conceptual.
Well, we'll see how this goes. We'll take a look at the futuristic design from architect Ma Yang-sung. It has been called everything from groundbreaking to Jetsons on the lakefront. It is the new George Lucas Museum conceptual design. John, will this design fly, or does it only look like it can?
It's crash landing. It is going to definitely auger into the earth. I don't think it's going to fly. I think it's been panned widely, and in my view, I think appropriately so. I thought it was a bit bizarre. We already have one mistake by the lake in Soldier Field where the spaceship landed. This would be an invasion of aliens, and we just don't need that.
I'm wondering if kind of the cover, it looks almost like a sheet that they're putting over it. So maybe we're still waiting for the unveiling. Maybe that was it, just out too early.
You know, I just think it fits right in with Soldier Field. I mean, every time I pass by there and see that flying saucer, I say, oh, you know, it just gives me the creeps. Now we're going to add to it and just kind of make it a sort of amusement park look.
If it had a teleporter, I'd be more in favor of it, because I think that would be really cool.
If it could do some of the Star Wars magic, then okay.
I like that idea.
Realistically, shouldn't the design for something like this push the envelope?
Well, yeah, it does, but it's just that when you have it next to something that's already pushed the envelope, it just, to me, it just makes the area look just a little strange and a little bit crazy. I don't think it really adds or complements Soldier Field, and I think it needed something like that to really complement that area.
Yeah, pushing the envelope's one thing. This is more like a envelope opener that's slice the thing open.
And taking over. It looks like it's eating the rest of the lakefront.
I just found it really amazing. But none of us are architects. What do we know?
We know what we like and what we don't like.
They are informed geniuses.
It's a matter of taste. All right, we will leave it at that. We'd like to thank our guests Amanda Vinicki, Mary Mitchell, and John Tillman. Tonight, now we bring you an update on a story we brought you about a community that was in distress.
When we last visited Roseland Hospital, this neighborhood's sole source of inpatient and emergency care was going under, drowning in $16 million in debt it owed to vendors, and just hours away from closing its doors. At the last minute, the state stepped in with $350,000 in emergency funding. That cash and new management helped turn the tide and sparked a rebirth of what is now called the new Roseland Hospital.
And I'm proud to say that we've gone from that time of great crisis to a time of great hope here at the new Roseland Community Hospital. So we've not only turned the ship here financially, but we've provided a cleaner, more efficient operational structure, and one that's focused on delivering high-quality health care.
Tim Egan is the new president and chief restructuring officer at Roseland. He says the health care center is still in the red, but debt has been reduced to half of what it was a year ago. Part of the old Roseland Hospital's problems were blamed on financial mismanagement and the fact that most patients here rely on Medicaid, which pays low fees to hospitals. Another 20% of patients treated here don't have health insurance and didn't pay their hospital bills.
We're an institution that has learned to live within its means, but we're now collecting for all the services that are being performed here at the hospital. So we're collecting on those revenues, and we're part of different programs that are sponsored by the state, including the hospital tax assessment. So we're looking for maximize those programs and even add on. But more importantly, what has happened here is now Roseland Community Hospital has a seat at the table with the state of Illinois.
The new Roseland Hospital also hired some of the 100 workers laid off in hard times and created some new jobs.
So there were about 400 employees here at Roseland when I took over back in July of 2013, and now we're over 490 employees.
Other additions to the hospital, a state-of-the-art mammography center, and a mobile dental clinic.
This brand new state-of-the-art 40-foot-long tractor trailer that goes out into the community at schools, churches, community centers, wellness fairs, health fairs, you name it, we're out there, and we're providing full-service dental to kids all over the greater Roseland community.
A community that had lost hope when the hospital tens of thousands of people relied on threatened to close now looks forward to big plans for the future, including construction of an outpatient pharmacy and a full lung health center.
We've got a bright future here, and I mean the one thing that is really important about the new Roseland Hospital is that we're saving this hospital because there's a family mentality here. Everyone believes we're family. We all are pitching in. We all are working hard.
To see more on the new Roseland Hospital, visit wycc.org and look for In the Loop.
Well, that does it for this week's show. You are now in the loop. Until next time, I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Good night.
Good night.